The next session is here. I want to welcome Professor Dr. Nazma Akhtar ma'am, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Jamia Millia Islamia University, the Central University, the #1 Central University of India. I also want to welcome our chairman of this show, this session, Dr. Roshi. Ms. Roshi is one of the most dynamic professor from Nepal, and she's doing wonderful work. I wish her all the very best. She's not keeping well the couple of days, but she's still here. Kind of commitment she made. I want to welcome Professor Veera Gupta ma'am, Miss Lena De Ross ma'am, Professor Amila ma'am. So formally, I would request Professor Roshi to introduce so that we save some time, and Professor Sushant Acharya ma'am. So our chief guest, we just want to say a couple of words. We have two stalwarts in the same frame today, as I see. Professor Dr. Rupa Manjari Ghosh ma'am and Professor Akhtar ma'am. So you both having in one frame really gives me a sense of huge satisfaction. And Professor Veera Gupta ma'am is also here, who has been extensively work in the education. Without taking and killing any more time, the objective of this session is very, very important, and this is actually one of the most important sessions of Policy Times, because you educate women, you educate the family, the generations. But if you educate a man, you educate just one person. That's the kind of impact women has. So we want to celebrate women leaders, women education leaders. At the same time, we also want to lay the foundation and roadmap of how we can provide education to the women of at least the underprivileged, to the backward, to everyone in any country of the world, especially in India. With this, I want to hand over to Professor Roshi.
And a warm namaste to you all. At the outset, I have to thank Mr. Akram for the kind introduction and must thank the Policy Times for the opportunity that has been provided to me to be part of this very distinguished and a learned panel. But in a way, I'm feeling a little embarrassed to wear the hat of a session chair in front of all these erudite and experienced seniors. I consider myself only as a humble facilitator in the presence of these luminary academicians and researchers. This being the last session of the day, I'm sure along with me, you're all eagerly looking forward to the distinguished panelists sharing their ideas centering on issues about unequal access and exclusion, and how policy initiatives and planning interventions are going to facilitate and promote the equal access to education. Some of the issues around the structural barriers to women education and the access to education, quality education, and the intervention. So I do hope that given the experience and the knowledge of the panelists, they would surely bring out a lot of valuable insights and useful tips for every one of us present here as the real takeaways from the event. Now, may I invite Professor Rupa Manjari Ghosh, the Vice Chancellor, Shiv Nadar University, to share her initial remarks, maybe next 2-3 minutes. Over to you,
Yes, thank you so much. Actually, I am not supposed to speak, but I can't say no to Akram when he says that you have to say. It's really heartening to see all of you. Professor Najma Akhtar, I have known her for a very long time. It's really good that she could be here. They're just big people in your panel. I'm seeing in the chat box some comments about an all-women panel, and people are celebrating that. And as much as I celebrate, the first point I think I wanted to make is that issues that women face are not women's problems. So I think it's not a feminist problem. It's something that all right-thinking people have to be in it together. So it's we have an audience that, of course, is quite mixed. So I think it should be looked at in that broader perspective. In very naive ways, in a higher education institution, though I know you'll be covering the full spectrum, I always thought that it's a very simple thing, that higher education, actually, the strength of it is banking on the fact that each individual is unique, and the real challenge for an institution of higher learning will be to frame and support policies and systems that cater to and respect the uniqueness and choices of an individual, whether a man or a woman. So I think the obvious thing you have to somehow keep on stating, and the uniqueness of individuals is what the strength of the system is. So I do not quite understand what it is that systematically we have been doing to destroy this very basic principle that we have. On this topic, we of course have a lot to say, but I'll restrict myself to a listener today, and I wanted to welcome all of you to this forum and listen to all of you and let the session start. Thank you very much for agreeing to chair this.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ghosh, for setting the tone to the entire event and the session. Now, may I request Professor Dr. Nazma Akhtar, the Vice Chancellor, Jamia Millia Islamia, to address the session as the chief guest. Professor Akhtar.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity and giving me the opportunity where such beautiful, bold and beautiful people are there to speak about women in education. Hello, Rupa ji, Rupa Manjari Ghosh, the eminent Vice Chancellor of Shiv Nadar University. Roshni, the young person to lead us. So happy to see you, Roshni. Professor Dr. Sushan Acharya from Nepal, Professor Veera Gupta from Nepal, India, Miss Dr. Lena De Ross, expert in from New Europe, Associate Professor from New Europe, and Dr. Vasudha Prakash from We Excel Educational Trust, and all others who are here. And this, I cannot see Professor Amila Jayaratne from Sri Lanka. Maybe she'll be joining later or something. Today, I'm so happy to be with you, all of you. And Akram, I'm happy that you forced me to join here. But it's a good thing. I never realized that this will be having such eminent people. And it'll be nice to at least give a few points before they can be the speakers there. Eminent speakers are there, and other distinguished guests whom I cannot see, but I know they are there. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a very good evening. It's almost night now. Even today, being born a girl in India and in several developing countries, it can be a primary cause of exclusion in the 21st century. Education is a basic child's right in India, yet persistent inequalities in educational handicaps, the lives of millions of the girls in the school-going category, they are still unequal. With education, women can break the vicious cycle and shape the world according to their aspirations. They can make informed choices, improving the lives of their families and communities, and therefore thereby promoting the welfare of the next generation of women citizens and all others. Let us look at some hard facts globally. Less than 40% of the countries provide girls and boys with equal access to education. Only 39 of the countries have equal proportion of boys and girls enrolled in secondary education. And it is not in India anyway. Despite all international and national efforts, over half the children who are out of school globally are girls. Of the world's 774 million illiterate adults, 2/3 are women, a share which has not changed for the past 2 decades. Among the world's 123 million illiterates, 76 million are female. School completion rates and learning levels of girls are lower than those of boys. Participation of girls decreases as they progress through the school system. Women are underrepresented in scientific and technological disciplines everywhere in the world. Though women have actually overtaken men in number in higher education globally, the positive global trend hides other issues of gender inequality in higher education. So girls' education should have a strategic development priority according to the Sustainable Development Goals set by UN as a minimum agenda of good governance to be implemented by 2030. And we are now nearing 2030. We have entered that decade now, last, by all states today. Better educated women tend to be more informed about nutrition and healthcare and marrying at a later age and tend to have fewer and healthier children. Women's participation in the labor force also increases, helping to lift the households, communities, and countries out of poverty. Talking of C19, COVID-19 has had a negative impact on girls' health, girls' well-being, and most of all, on education. And we can see how education has suffered in this year. And many are at the risk of not returning to school once they reopen and whenever they will reopen. Available research show that prevalence of violence against girls and women have increased during the pandemic, jeopardizing their health, their safety, their education, and their overall well-being. India still has one of the lowest female literacy rates in Asia. Today, there are 200 million illiterate women in India. This low level of literacy not only have a negative impact on women's life, but also on their family lives, on their country's economic development. For instance, a recent survey in India found that infant mortality was adversely related to mother's educational level. It is a well-known fact also otherwise. Though the gender gap is literacy has been decreasing since 1981, there continues to be a large gap between the literacy level of men and of women. The Indian government's commitment to education is stated in its constitution with an article promising free and compulsory education for all children until they complete the age of 14. This has now become the right to education for all children. We have very good policies, but where are we lacking? This is something to be talked about. The National Policy on Education 2020 reaffirmed the government's commitment to improving literacy levels by providing special attention to girls and children from scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, minorities, and other marginalized communities. Talking of rural-urban divide, there are dramatic differences in literacy rates by place of residence, which rates to rural area lagging behind the rates in urban areas. In 1991, the urban female literacy rate was more than twice that of rural, 64 and 31% respectively. While there has been substantial increase in literacy rates in both urban and rural area, the gap between the two sectors have now narrowed considerably, but it needs more coming together. Talking of state-wise literacy, Kerala has the highest female literacy rate with over 86% of women literate, and the state with the second highest female literacy is Mizoram, where nearly 79% of women are literate. On the other hand, There are several states, including Bihar, including Uttar Pradesh, the two most populous states that have literacy rates of less than 30%. Together, these two states have over 63 million illiterate women. Another issue is the gender gaps in university education, as already pointed out by the Vice Chancellor of Shiv Nadar University, Professor Rupa Manjari. Currently, a very small proportion of both women and men have a college education. Just 3% of men and 1% of women. Although a very small proportion of Indian population attends college, women account for 1/3 of the students at this level. This sex ratio is found for most fields of study except engineering and commerce, where women account for a much smaller proportion of the students. And in number 2, education, where in the area of education, the Department of Education, the field of education, where women account for nearly half of all the students. UN data suggests that India has increased its general enrollment rate for women in higher education in recent years. The share of women in all tertiary programs was 48.1% in 2017, had grown up from which has grown up from 45.9% in 2013. However, at doctoral level, which means at the level where research starts, at the doctoral level, progress has been very, very slow, with the share of female enrollment of 42% in 2017 compared to 41% in 2013, according to UNESCO figures. It comes from Times Higher Education data, which shows that the country has the lowest average female student ratio among nations, with at least 10 institutions in the World University ranking. On an average, just 1/3 of undergraduates at ranked Indian institutions are women, and India is one of the only 4 nations where the average proportion of female students at top university is fewer than 45%. Others are Japan, 36%, South Korea, 43%, and China, 44%. While about 40% of science, technology, engineering, and maths, the STEM graduates in India are women. 40% is a good number, which is the highest in the world, perhaps. The women's share in STEM jobs in India is a mere 14%. Participation in postgraduate and doctoral studies is also very poor. Diversity in STEM is necessary, and the need for R is to bridge the gender divide in employment. We must look at the cause for the dismal underrepresentation of women in science and technology jobs and take policy steps to rectify the situation. Government efforts are there, and they are visible also. I'm happy to note that with government's efforts, the number of girls students in IITs, which was just 8% in 2016, has increased to nearly 20% now. The Department of Science and Technology's Women Scientist Program is a laudable initiative that encourages women to take up careers in science and maths. We must celebrate our women scientists and mathematicians and showcase them as role models to our young girls so that we can discover more talented and hidden Asima Chatterjees, Janki Amals, and Shakuntala Devis. The provisions of new education policy should be fully capitalized and pedagogical changes be brought into primary education. A strong foundational STEM must be complemented to encourage students, children at the younger age to take up careers in science. The private sector should partner with academic institutions to strengthen the STEM research. We keep on talking about SDGs, but what have we achieved till now? How far have we got to in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? Target. By 2030, we have to achieve a certain level to ensure equal access to all women and men to affordable, quality, technical, vocational, and tertiary education. Consider the trends of female participation as per the All India Survey on Higher Education report. In the past 6 years, from 2013-14 to 17-18, we can clearly see that India has been able to deal with the inequalities in higher education, which has resulted in a two-way expansion of enrollment of female students in higher education, along with enlarging the delivery system, because now the numbers of institutions have also increased. Women's enrollment in higher education, which was less than 10% of the total enrollment on the eve of independence, it has risen to 48.6 in 2018-19. The total enrollment in higher education has grown considerably to 37.4 million, and females per 100 male student has also increased significantly in central universities, deemed universities, and government-aided institutions. The share of male students enrolled in engineering and technology is 71.1% compared to female enrollment, which is still 28.9%. The IIT enrollment of females was lower in IITs and NITs in comparison to overall enrollment of women. Considering the lower enrollment of females in this stream, the government decided to increase the female enrollment from 8% in 2016 to 14% in 18-19 and 17% in 19-20 and 20% in 2021 by creating supernumerary seats. The results are visible in real terms. This type of initiatives are needed by the government. The girls are coming up. They are allowed a relaxation of 1 year for MPhil and 2 years for PhD in the maximum duration. That is 2 to 6 years respectively as per UGC 2016 rules. In addition, provision was also made for women candidates to get maternity leave while they are doing the MPhil and PhD. Though these various initiatives in the government have been, an overall increase has come in the enrollment, and it is a very welcome step. Another thing which has come up and is quite visible is female-only universities. The number of female-only universities has increased from 11 to 16 from 2013-14 to 2018-19. And 10.82% of the colleges are exclusively for girls, which helps the girls, particularly from the rural areas, to get into these colleges, as their parents will be very sending them happily to these institutions. The idea is to educate them. It's immaterial. They'll learn to live with the other sex later on. They can compete with the boys later on, but let their parents leave their thinking and send the girl to the school, because that is also one of the reasons for stopping them from reaching the higher education. The total number of teachers in higher education has grown from a huge number to another huge number in these few years. But out of the total teachers, 57.8 are male and 42.2 are female teachers. An increase of 4.35 in female teachers from 2013 to 2018. At the all India level, there are 70 female teachers per 100 male teachers in 2018-19. The number of teachers at the university level is around 1.90 lakh, of which 36.65% are females, as compared to 1.56 lakh teachers in 2013. That is, it has increased. Among non-teaching staff, the average number of females per 100 is 49. So here it has not yet increased at that pace. And we rarely see a female registrar or female finance officer or a female who is doing full-time administration. Perhaps it takes our confidence in taking a female at that level, and particularly a female at the vice chancellor's level or pro-vice chancellor's level. That has to be changed. The gross enrollment ratio for women has increased by more than 4 times between 1999 to 2000 and 2004 to 2005. As a result, gender inequalities and gross enrollment ratio has come down very significantly during this period. The available estimates for net enrollment ratio, however, indicate that between these 1999 to 2004, the increase in enrollment ratio is very small in case of both men and women. Hardly it has increased by 2% in any case, and the level of inequalities remain almost the same. The male-female differences are much less in case of eligible enrollment ratios. While 49% of eligible girls join higher education institutions, the corresponding ratio is marginally higher for men, 56%, a difference of about 7% points. In India, only 1/4 of women, compared to 82% of women, engage actively in labor market, one of the lowest workforce participation rates in the world. 145 out of 153.
Yeah.
The challenge today is to build societies instilling gender parity across education, which is the only way to build more inclusive economies. Without the equal inclusion of half of the world's talent, we will not be able to deliver on the promise of the fourth industrial revolution of all the society, grow our economies for greater shared prosperity, or achieve the UN sustainable goals. Fortunately, the tools to accelerating gender parity have become more evident from societies which have bridged the gaps globally through an active collaboration between communities, civil society, private sector, and government efforts. And policy also needs policies. Government must create policies which provide talent development and diversity through inclusive education. The private sector should also offer equal opportunities to all members of the society. And the goal of all this is to create a gender equal society through bridging the gender gaps in education. And I think today's session will bring up a number of suggestions for this. A gender equal society is a human rights goal, as much of it is a development priority for all states of the world today. I'm keen to listen to others who will be giving some very good suggestions. And thank you very much for listening to my presentation patiently. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nazma, for your very, very insightful and very thought-provoking remarks. One thing I really found very engrossing from your address was that you've shared how if we could remove persistent inequality in education for women, they will be able to make very informed choices and promote the welfare of for the next generation of women citizens and for the rest. And thank you for bringing in so much of data across all the sectors, from the primary to the higher education. You've indeed covered a broad range of issues, from the general enrollment rates, the trends in female participation, the country-wise data, women participation in STEM courses, the SDG goals, and the dismal underrepresentation of women, government intervention, some of the policy initiatives, and the sad part of it, the pandemic forcing many women out of education. But despite all the challenges, we could sense a lot of optimism in terms of how you shared about the enrollment rate in higher education has been a significant improvement. So thank you for your wonderful remarks once again. So for the remaining 1 hour, we will have to divide our session very meaningfully. So I think it'll be in the fitness of things if I clarify the housekeeping rules. Given the time constraint, I would like to invite every speaker to speak for 8 minutes. Then probably we'll have 15 minutes for the question answers session. I might be sounding a little harsh, but I'll have to intervene, and maybe I'll raise a hand in the Zoom before you're ending before the last minute of your address, so that we can keep track of time. So without further ado, let me invite Professor Veera Gupta, Professor, National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration, NEIPA, India, to share her thoughts on the issues of unequal access and exclusion found in women education. One of the biggest problems among young girls in education has been the systematic exclusion, especially in the case of certain classes and communities, which might be the result of some kind of policy deficiencies that may not have been able to be corrected so far, especially in the context of South Asia. So, given this backdrop, I would like Professor Gupta to share her remarks. Over to you, Professor Gupta.
Am I audible?
Now.
Yes.
Okay. So, it is my privilege to be with the dignitaries on this Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Nazma is the panel. I really feel that Professor Akhtar has really made the task very easy by giving all the data and status of women education at all levels. Now, in my talk, I will try to focus on those policy issues or policy descriptions intent achieved. Okay, so institution, and also we had Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan in 2001. That means 20 years have gone, where we wanted every child to get enrolled in our system. So now 20 years since then, and our Right to Education Act in 2009. So nearly 11 years after the act, which is mandatory, still we find the children on the road. This is a usual sight in urban areas or rural areas where we find children are on the road. So once we had incentive schemes like SSA, we have act which is legally punishable, then why are children who are less than the age of these policy implementations or policy pronouncement, we still find them on the roads? We can find the loopholes in the policy pronouncement. We want every child to get enrolled. Now, who will enroll them? It is whose responsibility to enroll them? And if they are not enrolled, what? As per Right to Education Act, it is the system. It is their right and it is the system who is accountable to enroll. Now, if system is accountable, that means admission policy. Now you see admission, who is giving admission prior to 2001 and after 2001 SSA, prior to 2009 RTE Act and after 2090 RTE Act, it is in the hands of principal. There is no change. So principal is accountable. Whoever comes to my school, I will give admission, or sometime if it is a renowned or public school, there is a screening, lottery, or whatever are the areas. In government school, of course, it's not a screening, but then if the child comes, then only they will come. Now, if a school is located in a particular area, it is whose responsibility that all children of that area go and get admission. It's not of the school principal, because if child comes to that school, then only he will give admission, he or she will give admission. So accountability is not fixed on the system. So whether it is district education officer or block education officer, they do not have this as their terms of reference for their job or a geographical area earmarked that all children of this area need to get admitted. And that's the reason we are having these children on the road, because teacher is teaching, principal is administering, and those who do not want to go to school are loitering on the roads. So our admission policy or accountability has not changed in spite of these acts or incentive schemes like SSA. Now, there's another issue of policy, or you can say philosophical foundation of policy. So far in our country, we had been following equality as a duty. Equality means be it education, be it teaching, be it textbooks or whatever. Now, there's another new paradigm, which is equity in the terms of for marginalized section, be it girls or be it SC, ST or any regional minorities or disability. Now, this equity and equality cannot be implemented until unless we have budget earmarked for that. In education, in discourses, you must be hearing that 4%, 6% GDP should be spent on education. But what percentage on equality issues and what percentage on equity issues? For example, how many colleges will be established? It is an equality issue. But in order to give a scholarship for girls to come in the school or to provide hostel for girls is an equity issue so that they come at par. So what budget allocation has to be for equity issue and how much budget allocation has to be for equality issue is not defined. And if we see all our how many children are marginalized, and in order to bring them at par, how much resources are required to bring them at par. So equity and equality issue is still not really addressed in any policy.
Ma'am, if I may request you to conclude.
Okay, so fast. Okay, so and only 2-3 points I will say that in we have for education 2-3 ministries: Ministry of Education, Women, Child, and Disability, and these ministries. So this is, if one ministry is making a policy, they don't really see what other ministries are doing. And then there's another policy gap, like a regulatory body, executive body, or judiciary body. If they are making policies, they are also not at sync. For example, for disability, if health assistance is to be given in a school, maybe it is not there at the executive orders, but it is there in the regulatory policy. So if regulatory policy is saying something, that does not get translated into executive policy. Another point, in executive policies, generally all institutions, last even country is multilingual, and beneficiaries, all beneficiary, parents and students are not really English or Hindi, even Hindi conversant. So many a time we find that those circulars which come from Ministry of Education, they are just comprehended by the functionary at the grassroots level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Gupta. We'll definitely come back to you during the question answer session. Thank you for highlighting that despite the prevalence of the policies, there are a lot of loopholes, especially in terms of the policy implementation. The system accountability is going to be woefully missing out there. And you've also highlighted the issue about the equality and the equity issues. I hope whatever you've commented reaches to the ears of the policymakers. The other issue, probably in the area of women education, is going to be the issue of gender neutral challenges coupled with gender specific challenges for girls' education, especially in South Asia. For instance, some of the gender neutral issues might have arisen due to poverty, due to parents' ignorance, or say distance involved in commuting to and fro from the college, or sheer absence of proper and adequate transport facilities. Whereas the gender specific issues are those that is related to perceptions regarding what do we gain by making the daughters highly educated because they're going to be anyway married off eventually. For example, if a smartphone was to be bought for an educational need, the son must get it at first as a matter of priority and privilege and not the daughter, as parents perceive that they have to rather save the money for the marriage and not to be spent on education. So how do you deal with these kind of twin issues of gender neutral and gender specific issues for girls' education? So may I now turn to Professor Amila, the head for Department of Marketing, University of Sri Jayawardenepura, Sri Lanka, to throw some more light on this issue, focusing more about the benefits of women in education, some of the obstacles, the roles of the government, community, and the family. Ma'am, we request you to be a little quick, given the time constraint that we have. Over to you, Professor Amila.
Hi, it's a pleasure for me to speak few words representing Sri Lanka as the lady professor from one of the leading national universities. In fact, as one of the previous speakers rightly pointed out, it says that nowadays we are in a generation where the females needs to be more empowered. One of the way that we can empower is let them educated. And so if you are looking at the way that how the female should be educated, one of the major obstacles that we are having is the poverty. As it says that globally, there are about 130 million girls who are not entering the school. And as one, it's little difficult to afford for transportation, textbooks, and uniform. So therefore, it's keep the girls away from the schools. And the other obstacle is the child marriage. And though it is also not that much prominent in Sri Lanka. So we know that child marriage under the age of 16 or 18, so that is quite serious and keeping the women education little malfunction. It's said about 700 millions of women around the globe are getting into their marriages. So before they turning to the 18 years. So that is a very pathetic situation that's also very serious in some countries like Sub-Saharan Africa or something like that. And the other one is household tasks. So where the the parents, because of so many reasons, parents keep the girls for household activities instead of sending them for the school. That also keep the girls out of the school. And the other one is gender bias violence, where when we are talking about the gender bias violence, when we are letting the girls out of the home and until they reach the school, if it is little long distance, there is a high tendency that they are being caught with the sexual abuse or harassment. So therefore, as a security, sometimes parents little reluctant to send their girls, send the girls to the school, and instead they keep those girls inside the house. So that is also something very serious, some countries like in Tanzania. And the other one is conflict and crisis, especially like the COVID-19 or maybe natural disasters or maybe some war situation that really malfunction the women in the education. And also the biologically, sometimes the women's in a certain periods, like because of the menstruous cycles, so they try to refrain from the society so that it's also discourage them to continue in their education. And the other very pathetic situation is the attitude where some parents and at a society at large, they think that the females are having set role in the society, like they get married and they make the next generation, so that no point that they are being educated as such the case of the boys. So therefore, the government is having a big responsibility of crafting the policies which facilitate the females also being given the equal right for being educated. And it's not only the government, we can't simply keep the finger to the government. So as a society, as a community, so we should be aware, like we should discourage the child marriage and we should not keep the girls for household activities. And attitudinal change should be there as a society at large. And also the family is also having a big responsibility. Like if you have the boy and a girl, the equal right should be given for both, instead of taking the girl as an inferior asset where not be educated as such. But however, the being Sri Lanka, so which our situation is relatively more favorable in compared to the other South Asian countries. Of course, being a colony period, we had the same inequality problem for females to get involved to the education because in the colony period, Sri Lankan, the families just let their boys to be educated because it was not under free education. But in 1945, so the country reformed its education sector and introduced the free education for all the students for primary, secondary, university education, regardless of the gender. I think this is the only, Sri Lanka is the only country which provides the university education free of charge. So even from the constitute itself, it provides the equal right for both male and female. So therefore, this reduces the gender gap in the education enrollment. So if you are looking at the today's figures, it says that today's enrollment rates in Sri Lanka, primary schools are about the same as boys and girls. And in secondary schools, there are even slightly more girls than the boys. So that means like the Sri Lankan situation is quite different from the other South Asian countries' situation. So sometimes boys stop their education after the secondary school, but the girls, they tend to continue until they enter into the university education, because even the university education is the free of charge. And also, I'm happy to say Sri Lanka as a South Asian country has already achieved that UN Millennium Development Goal for gender equality for all the levels of the education. So it's a great achievement as a small island. And I think it can be used by the other South Asian countries and even some developing countries as a model. Also, it's evident, like we had the world's first female prime minister elected in 1960. So it represents the Sri Lanka is relatively having the equal right for female as a society, but it's reflecting in the education system as well. So in general, if I'm sharing the figures in the Sri Lankan perspective, our adult literacy rate is 92%, which is more or less equal among the both gender. And also we roughly having 10,000 schools, over 4 million students. Also, we have a lot of only girls schools where only the girls are being admitted to those schools. And still the country is maintained, all these majority of these schools are being maintained by the government as a free education policy. And one of the other important thing which I would like to tell you, like by the government, it's been given free books, free uniforms, and free meals for all the students under the age of 14. So that is also facilitating parents to send their girls and boys, regardless the gender, to the school. I think that is one of the advantages where females are being benefited in Sri Lanka. So
Thank
this
you,
education policy.
Professor, now if you could
Yeah.
close, please.
Yeah. So this education policy is immensely helped the women engagement, keeping Sri Lanka little high in the flag. However, in the future, there are certain things that we as a country should address. One thing is, even though the female education is relatively equal, and sometimes in some cases it's even outstanding from that of the males, when it's come to the contribution to the labor force, for certain private sector, they're a little reluctant to recruit the females for certain jobs. So therefore, as a country, we have to look at how that gap should be mitigated. And also there are certain gaps in between the urban and rural, the education in terms of the facilities, but of course it doesn't limit the females education in government. So therefore, the government policy, the current policy should be continued. And also in the future, they have to see like how these female skills and the knowledge can be customized in a way that it's suitable for diverse jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Amila, for keeping it so succinct. You've highlighted how abysmal and abject poverty is going to be universal, and that really has kept girls from schools. And another challenge that has come up is about the girls' marriage. You've also raised rightly the issue of gender-based violence, apprehensions about sexual abuse and insecurity as a result of which parents are reluctant to send their girls to school. And now overall, on top of all of these, the COVID and other sorts of pandemic that has discouraged women to continue their education. You've also talked about the stereotype and set minds, rigidity, which has all reduced which have led to the gender gap. And of course, we've all realized how the attitudinal and cultural change is going to be the most daunting thing. But you've also highlighted how educational policy is going to be so important and imperative to bring about the children, to bring about change, and focusing on the issues and challenges precisely in the context and exclusive to Sri Lanka. So thank you. We will come back in the question answers session again. So women have been natural educators and teachers, and the world has accepted that women or mothers are the first school, probably even before the babies are born. Despite this being the fact, girls face everyday barriers to education due to poverty, due to cultural barriers and conservatism. Or it could be about poor infrastructure, violence, and their own inherent fragility. Now, may I request Professor Susan Acharya, Central Department of Education, Tribhuvan University, Nepal, to share her comments with regard to the structural barriers to women education, some of the forward-looking approaches to girls' education, especially with regard to the higher education, and also highlight about the access to the quality education and some of the intervention. Over to you, Dr. Acharya.
Thank you, Rosie ma'am. I would like to extend my warm namaste to everybody. And let me turn off the video because of the unstable net, so I can be more stable, I guess. Yeah, thank you, Rosie ma'am. I would like to briefly give overview of the higher education situation in Nepal, and I certainly echo Madam Akhtar, because we are not different from other countries. The higher education enrollment has been increasing, And then female enrollment has also been increasing gradually. And when we look at the data, actually I come from Tribhuvan University, which is the largest public university, oldest and the largest. So almost 80% of the higher education students are absorbed by Tribhuvan University. So I would like to base my data on Tribhuvan University and other two universities. As I said, the enrollment rate has been increasing, and actually the girls' enrollment is higher than the boys' enrollment. But then again, the subject choice, in which subjects they are more. I mean, we follow the global trend in that as well. And but one thing that we need to consider is many students are going abroad for study, and then though we don't have the data, we can make an educated guess on the basis of our observation and experience that there are more men than women. Maybe that's one of the reasons that is influencing the data, very slightly though. And as I said, though the enrollment data has been increasing, the subject choice is still the same. Like, for example, in education, there are 68.47% of girls in the total enrollment. The data represents 4 universities, not all 11 universities, only 4 where the data is available. And in medicine is 66.67. It's higher because this data includes nurses also, the nursing students as well. But interestingly, in management, there are 60% women in total. I'm talking about in total enrollment, which means they are more than 50% in all 3 major fields. But in engineering, law, science, and technology, the GPI is less than 0.5. And this actually, what happens is, if this kind of segregation continues, then we'll continue having less boys, and boys will be, it inhibits boys and men from field of study or discipline, which is predominantly regarded as feminine. And we'll see underrepresentation there. And then the same happens in science and technology and mathematics, because this is considered as males, and then more men are in that field, and women who have less access. I mean, access in the sense that when there are not many women, everybody tend to think that this is men's field. So this segregation continues, although the policies advocate for gender equality and in education. So this segregation continues in the labor market. Since we produce different kind of set of expertise, then this reflects in the labor market as well. And then the graduation rate is higher in master's level than in bachelor in general. And then the enrollment is also higher in bachelor than in master's, because the average age of marriage in Nepal corresponds with the average age of the bachelor degree students. So most girls are married when they are either in bachelor or as soon as they enter master's degree. So we lose many women at that stage, because these two corresponds. And then, but how many actually graduate from higher education? We don't have that data now, and I think this is also a gender issue. Not having a data is gender disaggregated data is also a gender issue in higher education. And I'm not going to talk about other areas like curriculum, pedagogy, etc., because we don't have much time. But I would like to highlight key issues. For example, What we are experiencing is, while we're promoting use of ICT in education, girls are experiencing harassment. You know, male students are using social media and to harass their female classmates, and female students are scared to voice. I mean, due to fear of more harassment, abuse, or being defamed. So this is putting more psychological pressure that we have to deal with. Now I would like to jump to the women's involvement in, you know, what I call the knowledge production level. Like we are celebrating more female entering the higher education, which is they are coming in as a consumer, but as a producer of knowledge, we are very few. For example, in all 4 universities, including mine, which is the largest and oldest, we still have only 13.2% teaching staff are women, and then only 3.85 are professors. And the same with the non-teaching staff and all. So, and then I got opportunity to listen to the women who held the leadership position, and they had to share I mean, a lot of things. And one which stood out that I would like to share, and she's still the member of our National Planning Commission right now. She said that it is not policy that uncooperative, it is people who are uncooperative, which means that women are not wanted where men get to socialize more. So they don't want to, and even if they are there, they don't want to listen, they don't want to, they restrict in many different ways to make any decisions. So it's a, what we need is change in attitude, behavior, and practice. So it's not on the policy alone is not helping. And having said this, I would like to conclude with few observations. I mean, I didn't go to the school education, but today, because I'm only highlighting the higher education, higher education, women in higher education. Or what I personally think is, if we claim that education is human right, and women and girls are so automatically should be granted that right, they should get that, then I think we should not rather promote, rationalize women's education as an instrumental objective. What I mean by instrumental objective is whenever we talk, we say that, oh, if women are educated, then the social indicators will look better. So we never say that for men. So on one hand, we say that it's human right, but on the other hand, we're tangled in this instrumental objective. So why? It's irrespective of this instrumental, outcome. I mean, they should be able to use that right. So, and then I think Rosie ma'am also raised this intersectionality lens. So I think we need to use intersectionality lens and then devise the intervention accordingly. Because in a country like Nepal, even though it's a small one, the diversity is huge in terms of race, in terms of caste, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of language. So, and then disability. So we need to poverty, of course, and regionality. Far Western region, we can't compare with the Kathmandu Valley or even Eastern part. So we have to use the lens of intersectionality, and only you devise the interventions. Now I'm just talking about the broad general issues and general data, but we need to go underneath that, and then only we'll see the reality. But in general, the higher education situation is what I just presented. And as a teacher, higher education teacher, I feel that we need to be both teacher and a counselor. We don't have, I don't know in other South Asian universities, but in ours, we don't have that counseling service. So when I mentioned that the use of ICT that we are promoting on one hand, and we are facing different issues as well. So we have to work as a counselor as well. So that is the issue that we have to deal with. Roshi ma'am, I'm done for now.
Thank you, Susan ma'am, for keeping it short and sweet. From taking cues from what you have just said about the enrollment rate, which are definitely encouraging and in the higher education domain, but the interesting fact that you've highlighted is that we all must note is that the enrollment rate has been more as consumers and not as producers of knowledge. And that is something I can also share from my own experience as an assistant professor at Kathmandu University. And I hope that's the case with other universities as well. So there are a lot of things to be done, the improvements to be done. But again, with regard to the choice of subjects, the kind of psychological pressure of abuse that you've talked about, and even the abysmally low numbers of the teaching staff, how the data, which has still become a bigger challenge because we don't have enough data regarding the passing out number of the graduates, and ultimately how you beautifully summarize it as how we should not be promoting women education as an instrumental objective. So thank you. We will definitely come back to you. The next panelist that we have is Miss Lena De Ross. She's an expert in global philosophy, founder, president of Omli Link. Mr. Akram, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, so I want to invite her actually. I want to say a few words about Lena ma'am.
Okay.
Roshi, just give me a couple of seconds. I'll take a couple of seconds from you. So Ms. Lena ma'am, you know, she's a European, but she's more than like an Indian. You know, she's an Indian more than like an European. And she knows Sanskrit better than many Indians. She speaks in Sanskrit. Yeah, and she can talk, she can write. She has excellent understanding about India, Indian society, Indian people, and a lot. So I would request, it's been actually awesome to have you, ma'am, in all our webinars and events. We would be extremely happy to hear, because you as a women leader from Europe would be very happy to hear from you about the European experience. And also because of your vast knowledge about India, what are the initiatives? How can we have basically your perspective of women leadership?
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
To add to that, maybe I'll just quickly add a little bit, because I was trying to just finish the introduction. So Ms. Lena, if you would allow. So she's an expert in global philosophy, the founder president of Omli Link, EU boutique investment bank, and associate publisher, New Europe, UK. So we've been hearing so much from our South Asian panelists so far. So for a lot of us, I think we would like to know from you if it is an entirely different value system in education between Europe and Asia. That tells a lot of striking difference in access to educational outcomes. How do you see if there is any kind of possibility of quality convergence? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm a little bit blushing from everything that Akram said. I'm not such a, verse scholar. I do study your tradition, and I'm very fond of it. And I do study some Sanskrit, but that doesn't mean that I'm fluent in it. Anyway, I would like to touch another subject. First of all, I understand all the practicalities and all the issues that we need to look into your part of the world in terms of inequality and in terms of local traditions, etc. But what I would like to touch is basically the role, the principles in the role of a woman that we all understand, but I think that in many cases, at least in the part of where I'm living, sometimes are distorted and they're not taken into consideration in a way that will give to the societies and communities the better life. So women have a divine nature. And if they are given the right education, it will give the world, it will give and it will make miracles both in their family and in their society. We have to understand our role, and we need to know that we have this emotion which is inherent in us, and this is called love. And if we can spread it to the world, close to us and further to us, the more we do, the more we will help societies flourish. This distortion that I was telling you that exists in this world in the West is that people believe that equality means that you are the same in terms of comparing a man and a woman, which is not right, because women are different and men are different. We are equal in front of our Creator. We are equal in front of the universal laws that are dictating the role of us. But we are different amongst us, and a woman is different than a man. That doesn't mean that a woman is, better or worse, but it is different. We do all have this, as you say in your tradition, nature that is called in your language or in Sanskrit, Sat Chit Ananda. And this is something that all human beings carry. And from that point of view, yes, we are equal. Now, on the other thing, women can do a few things much better than men can do, and men can do a few things better than a woman can do. A man can fight better, but no man can be equal to a woman in taking care of a child, in feeding a child, and giving birth to a child. So that makes our nature better in terms of taking care and in terms of giving, as I said before, tenderness and love. So this has to be taken care into the education of women, because if women get the right education, then the world will be better. And there is one danger that I would like to touch, that I have seen in my life in the society of my country. We have this intercommunication with the West, global intercommunication, and we are looking to things that are happening elsewhere and we want to imitate them. It is very important that we all keep our own traditions. Of course, give education. Of course, have the more educated a person is, a woman or a man, but especially a woman, the better for the society and for her family. But we need to keep our traditions, because our traditions are important, and we were not born in a space and a time and in a place by chance. We are born because, we want to be born in that place. So it's important to keep these traditions in our life, and it is important to respect them, but also develop the education in all the levels. I understand, and it was very interesting to hear all the statistics and data that the ladies gave before, and I understand the need of the policies that the governments have to do in that part of the world. I'm just mentioning things that I see being distorted in the West, and you are in a position that you can not let your own ladies and your own girls go towards that direction. Well, thank you very much. I think that this was all I could say.
Now, without further losing any time, may I invite upon Dr. Vasudha Prakash, the founder director of VXL Educational Trust. It's a 20 years old organization dedicated to serving the persons with special needs. So We Excel has 13 centers in Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra and has impacted the lives of as many as 45,000 people. She holds a doctorate in special education from the Rutgers University, USA, and has worked as an assistant professor at Keene University before returning to India and starting We Excel. Dr. Prakash, just to quickly summarize, as what Ms. Lena has mentioned, that women, as women, we're very fundamentally different from men, and this definitely has to be taken into account when you talk about women education.
Okay, so I'll get right to the point that I wanted to make. When the topic was presented, women in education, it kind of made me smile, because when you come to school education, it's all women. You enter a school and you enter a workshop for teachers, and it's all women, and the men are really a minority. So the point I'm going to make today is about the balance of men and women in education. That's what I'm going to talk about. And Ms. Roshi, you had asked me about the East, the West, how you can bring West into educational practices in India. I'll touch upon that as well. So before we do that, I just want to talk about one fundamental, very foundational issue that we have to keep revisiting. Like conferences like these and so many panels and symposiums, we talk about statistics, we talk about content, we talk about methodology, all of that. But do we always come back to putting the child at the center? This is a question I have. We have to coming back to this point that the child, who is this child? What does a child need at every stage of his or her development? This is something we have to keep revisiting over and over again, because a child's developmental need keeps changing. What the child needs at a consciousness level keeps changing. So, and also, what is the goal of education? I think sometimes we have this tunnel effect. The goal of education becomes success, economic stability, and financial stability. And those always become the goals, which are very important goals. But also, when we look around us, I think one important goal we have to always keep in mind is to raise children who will become clear thinking people with balanced emotions and who are responsible in our actions. And one more goal of education, according to me, is to meet the needs of all human beings, whatever, despite their abilities and whatever the spectrum, whichever part of the spectrum they lie in. So then, which brings me to my subject, which is special education. I've been working in the field of special education for about 25 years in the US and back here in India. I came to India 20 years back and set up the Excel Educational Trust. Very enthusiastically, I thought I can bring best practices from the West to India and, just like do things that like they did, the systems and everything. But I was woken up very quickly to the fact that culturally we are different. Everything, the children are different, parents are different. So I had to really find my feet here in India and resort to indigenous, natural, organic practices. So, the one thing I wanted to do, when we talk about women in education, special education is completely the domain of women. Mothers who want to help their children, who want to bring some, but desperate, to make a change in their children, to explore every possible thing for their children, they start schools. So you find that most special educators are women, sometimes mothers. Heads of special schools are women. The leadership is women. And yes, while that's really commendable that women take initiatives in this, we find a pressing, urgent need for men to be there. Because children when you look at the world, there has to be a balance between men and women. Children look for men role models. They want balanced human beings for men and women. And this is emphasized more in special education as they grow older, pre-adolescence. And we need men also to come into this field, because children need to be taught by men. They need that men's perspective. Even like simple things like, for how many years will mothers bathe children with special needs? How long will they do their activities for daily living? Even for those, to teach those things, you need men. Men are needed to bridge that gap between the world and the schools. So my point that I want to make in this August forum is that yes, women are really, and thought leaders are all men, but when it comes to actually implementing education in the classroom, classrooms, whether it's regular education, primary education, and school education, it's predominantly women. So I think I want to pitch for this fact that we need men to enter the education fray as well, because the reason is men enjoy teaching too. They need to be womanized and humanized by getting into education. And I think that one of the reasons that men don't enter is like the economic thing. The teachers are not well paid. Education is not a lucrative profession. We need to address that. Education has to become attractive, because the education is actually the future of the world. And even companies have to allow maybe once a week for men to come into schools, men to come into colleges and teach children, and men to come into special schools and experience this aspect of full heart forces being at the brightest. So I will bring my presentation to this one summarizing point, that yes, women are dominating school education, teaching, heading schools, but we do need a balance of role models, balanced human beings, the form of men and women, to be in this teaching profession together. And I also feel that the gender balance has to be maintained, and all kinds of balance has to be maintained. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for bearing with me during this audio problem that I have. Any questions I'm open to.
Thank you, Dr. Vasudha, for keeping it so crisp and so sweet and highlighting the need for putting the child at the center. And one thing that was particularly interesting was how the men needs to be womanized, to quote you, and humanized for education. And though women are the natural educators, but it's equally important that the child also gets the men's perspective.
Yeah, there's just one more point I want to add. The role stereotypical things have changed now, because women take men's roles as well, don't they? So that men also have to share in and become, get into education and parenting and all of that. So,
true, absolutely. And it was also heartening to note how you said that it is very important to resort to indigenous and organic practices, and not everything can be borrowed from a different context altogether. Mr. Akram has been requesting me to close the session. I don't know. We have, I don't know if we can take some questions, or a question or two from the audience. If not, I'll have to close this session requesting Nazma ma'am to give her final remarks. And thank you for staying all throughout this session, ma'am. We would like to hear some concluding remarks from you. And if the time permits, maybe I'll just take one question. There are a lot of questions flooded in the chat box, but let's see how much the time is going to permit us. Over to you, Professor Nazma, once again.
Ma'am, you have to unmute, ma'am.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roshi. You are doing it so well, and particularly people with long ideas to speak. You have to be you are being very able to handle it very well. We have to, after so many ideas which have come up, it is definitely there that, like Prakash said, no, not Prakash. Prakash, you said about the men.
Yes.
Men are already there. Men are already there, but we have to see that enough women are also there. And when it becomes 50-50, we'll stop. Okay. I was thinking that for doing all these things, we need to change our typical model. Government is not going to do everything for us. We have to think of other ways of doing it, and the having the PPP model should be encouraged and taken up in bringing changes and making it the girls' education better, so that they are coming here.
So I think ma'am got some internet issue.
Properly implemented, not only just implemented. Should be properly, with enough trainings and enough talking about it, and doing it in the field also. Universities, colleges have to be aggressively encouraging the girls' education, and when their ranking is being done, how many girls have you encouraged more should be taken into account, because it's not only simply ranking saying 20, what is the difference you have made in the girls' education till now. The research processes should be seen with a change, not only to be done by the about girls, but also the uh, it should be made easy for the girls to take up research at a higher level, because it's not only teaching job which is for girls, but also a lot of they can come up as researchers, as scientists and other things. So education, in education sectors, girls have to attracted towards all, and collaboration between the government, the private, the industry, and everybody and anybody who is ready to encourage the girls coming to the schools and colleges should be there. And we have to learn from the other countries. They can be developed countries, they can be developing countries. If we can learn from Sri Lanka, let us do it. So that is important, because if they can do it, we can also do it. Leadership and management levels have to be given many a times to women. We have to increase our confidence. It's the men's confidence which is needed to make a woman confident, to that she can lead, and that will automatically increase, attract girls towards education. If she sees a person who's leading, the person who's managing as a woman, and the best practices wherever they are in India or abroad have to be documented, so that we learn from them. That's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've come to the very end of it, and I must close it now. So to summarize what Professor Nazma and the rest of all the panelists have mentioned today, we have witnessed the problem of a very meaningful, equal, and quality education to girls at all levels, and which is much more pronounced in the South Asian subcontinent. And we have seeing the dichotomies across the social structure between the rural and the urban, higher and the lower economic classes, across religion and culture. Maybe we could not touch upon all of these, but as most of the panelists also agree that not educating girls is not a burning issue just as a problem of one society, community, or just a single nation, but it is the problem of the entire humanity. Because half of the population living in any of the geographical border is forced to take the suboptimal and sorry treatment from the government, societies, and the families as well. So just increasing the literacy rates, or maybe just kind of indicative inclusion, may not be able to compensate for the deficit that we have witnessed in experiencing meaningful educational outcomes and gainful employment. So I hope today's discussion has highlighted some of the very pertinent issues that are worth considering seriously by our policymakers, by our government, by our academic institutions, right activists, and practitioners in education. With that note, let me conclude, and let me once again thank all the panelists for their time and our chief guest as well. Thank you so much.